What's going on, guys, and how are we doing today? So like we said before, our Thunder Dragon playmats are in. I posted in the Thunder Dragon Facebook group as well. Someone mentioned an ad they had seen where it didn't look as good. I'm not sure if that was the Facebook post with the watermarking or the previous video. So if the camera doesn't quite show it off that nice, I apologize, but there is another image of it in that group. Otherwise, our Facebook group, Team Set Pass, link down below, has all the details if you wish to get your own, as well as our other mats. Without any further ado though, 10 tips to get better at playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm going to try to break them down. I kind of have some of the breakdowns on the screen, and I will go into them a little bit further. So number 1 and 2, I wanted to talk about a couple more important ones, and then we progress as we go. Number 1, clock management. Take your time at a reasonable pace. What I mean by that is don't slow play, but you don't have to hurry up and just play. When you say activate runic tip, you can take a little bit of time and think about what you want to search out and think about what the next move means. You don't have to just play it, hurry up, search a card within 2 seconds. You can look through your deck, play at a reasonable pace. Don't slow play, but at a reasonable pace. Like I said there, think out your plays. You don't want to think too far ahead, but when you're making a move, you should, at least for that move, kind of know what direction you're going to go if it goes through, and know what direction you're going to go if it doesn't go through. So think ahead one play, but don't think too far ahead where you start to misplay on your current plays because you're thinking too far ahead into the game and something happens and you're not ready for it. So think 1, maybe 2 plays ahead, especially because, like I said, if you're going one direction and do you get negated or does it go through? You should at least know both those options when you're going. Ability to see the timer. This one is a big one, especially at locals where every seat might not see the timer. Be able to see it so that you don't have it get used against you. Being used against you. Speak up if you're being slow played. Don't sit there and constantly bug the judge. However, especially at bigger events, if more pro players are against you, they will absolutely take their time a little more than reasonable and push things to be to see what they can get away with if you're going to say anything, and then they will continue to do that. If you ever watch a lot of these players on stream, games 1 to the first 37 minutes of the match, they play so much slower than they do for that last 3 minutes. Once it hits that 3-minute mark, if they are losing, they all of a sudden, they remembered their deck. They're playing their deck so fast. Speak up so you don't get put into that situation. Another thing you can do if you can see the clock and you're in game 2. So when do you scoop game 2? If you're in a really bad spot already, but you might be able to top deck that one card and get out of a situation, and there's say 10 minutes on the clock, but your opponent just started they're mid combo and you know they're going to play for another 4 or 5 minutes, and then if you get your one card you can win, and then you obviously move on. Or do you just scoop and say, okay, I got 10 minutes now, I get to pick if I'm going first or second, I get that advantage going into game 3. That's something you need to think about, because if you can see the clock, you can see that there's, like I said, example being 10 minutes, and example your opponent has 3, 4, 5 minutes left in their combo, and you only have one card to break that board. You may as well just scoop, save the time, and go into game 3. Obviously, if you lost game 1, you're going to have to wait it out and then hope you get your card, but do think about that. You don't always want to try to play through it if the time is not in your favor and you want to just pick it up, go to game 3, and have a little bit more time to actually interact with your opponent. So again, guys, don't slow play. Play at a reasonable pace. Make sure you can see the timer. Think out your plays 1 to 2 plays ahead, and make sure you speak up if you're being slow played. Don't feel bad about it, because they should be the ones feeling bad for slow playing. And then scooping game 2 strategically to be able to have time to even have a game 3 so they don't take that away from you. Number 2, knowing your game state. You track your effects, your searches. Obviously, you cannot write it down, you cannot note take, but remember, if your opponent searches a specific card, to ask to read it right when they grab it, because afterwards you can't. Public versus private knowledge. Face down on the field, like set cards on the set cards on the field, banish face down cards, card in your hand. Those are all private knowledge. If you search out a card and your opponent wants to read it, okay, fine. You have to let them read it. But then once you start progressing the game again, if they say, oh, can I read that card you added to your hand? No, you cannot. And not only is it just a polite gesture to let them or to tell them, it's actually illegal to let them. It is against the rules to let them because it's private knowledge at that point. It does not remain public knowledge for the entire turn. It becomes private knowledge once you start progressing the game state. It is, like I said, technically against the rules for them to ask, and it's against the rules for you to reveal it. I've actually seen people ask and then reveal it, and then the one who asked called a judge. The one who asked got a sharking penalty because obviously they were just trying to get them in trouble. It was actually kind of funny to watch. But do keep that in mind. You are allowed to refuse it after you start progressing the game again, and you can do it in a polite manner. Just say, I'm sorry, but it's not public knowledge any longer. If they ask, did you search this specific card off this card's effect, then you say yes. But if they ask what it does, you don't have to tell them. If they speak it by name, they can look it up on the Neuron app, but that's about it. You don't have to reveal these things. Same goes for set cards. You search, or you can set a card from your deck. Okay, you verify it, you set it, and then they want to check it out, you let them right away. You progress the game state later in the turn. Oh, what's that set card do? Don't tell them. They don't get to know at that point. Again, they can ask it specifically by name, or set cards on the field, they can ask specifically by name, but they can't just say, what's that card do? What's that card's attack? They can't do things like that because it is still private knowledge at that point. Did they brick and body language? If your opponent goes first and they just immediately pass turn right to you, odds are they bricked. So a few things. One, I assume they have at least 2 hand traps, and then hopefully some dead engine cards and not too many more. But I prepare myself in case they do have more than 2 hand traps. And also, then their next turn, when they activate that first really good card, I don't hesitate to ash it, because if they just pass turn the turn prior and now they have a starter, odds are stopping that starter is going to stop their turn once again. Body language. This one's easier at locals because you might pick up on how certain players are. Like mine, for instance, has a player who is very good at the game. However, when his hands aren't as good, or when he's not doing as good, his body language changes and his just demeanor. He may get a lot louder and start telling jokes because he's trying to distract you, and a lot of the time it works. Whereas if he's being a little bit more serious or quieter and thinking through his plays, you know that if you're in the plus position and he's acting this way, that he may have something, he may not. He's trying to really think through it. Whereas if it's his turn, he has a decent board, and he's trying to do these things to distract you, you can kind of guess and base how you should play off of their body language. Sometimes when players have Nibiru, I see them, they're holding their cards and they like have their finger on the top of the card once you hit like that 4th, 5th summon, and they may just be bluffing it. You have to kind of pick that up. That's why I said locals is much easier to do this, because you can kind of learn how people's playing habits are a little easier. Number 3, verify what you can. We kind of very briefly touched on this, the stats of a specific card in the last one. What can you verify? These are just 3 examples. If you list a card by name, like say I have a set Cyber Dragon on the field, and you say, what's that card's defense? I don't have to tell you. If you say, what is Cyber Dragon's defense? 1600. If you ask the stats of a specific card, you answer it. If they say that card, or what's it do, or what is that, you don't have to tell them. But if they say specifically the card, you should tell them. Otherwise, they can look up the Neuron app, but it is to keep a knowledge on where you guys are at. Other things, my friend Purely, if they activate it and they just say, oh, I'm just going to grab Sleepy Memory off of it, make them show you 3 copies. Make them prove that they have 3 in deck, because, I mean, that one's a common. Or which is it Pretty Memory, that's the $30-$40 one. They say, okay, I'm going to get Pretty off this. Make them show you that they have 3. What if they only have 2 and they have to show 2 and say 1 sleepy, and then they hit the sleepy? Now they have sleepy. Not saying that's a bad thing to happen for them, but make them show that they have 3 of what they're doing, and this goes for any card like that. I know there's a True Draco one as well. Kashtira, Unicorn, Extra Deck Rip. I've seen people on a lot of Dueling Book replays, when they use this effect, the opponent just banishes face down right from the extra deck and never even shows them what card they banished. They could have banished anything face down. Make them show you. They just take it out of their extra deck, show you, banish it face down. That are 3 examples of things that you can verify and that you definitely should. Don't just take your opponent's word for it. Something you cannot verify: Super Heavy Samurai. Okay, you have Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician on the field, so in order for them to use monster effects, they must set a spell or a trap first. They don't play spell or traps, right? Well, let's say they set a card in their spell and trap zone and you feel like that's off because they don't play them, right? You cannot make them show you. You cannot make a judge check it. You cannot do any of this. You just have to trust, unless you know, like if you knew every card in their hand and they set a card and you know it's just a monster and they're trying to play, okay, you can call a judge for that and explain why and how you know their cards and that there's no way they have a set card. But under other circumstances, you just kind of have to trust them, and if you have a chance to prove they lied, you can. But if they win the game and they just scoop their cards up quick, unfortunately, you can't make them verify that it is a spell or a trap. Deck building. Build for your specific event. This means if you're going to locals, build for your locals. If you know what decks people are playing, build for that. If you're going to a regional YCS, you got to build for a broader spectrum, and it's a little bit different. Like locals, some locals don't have meta, so you play completely different. You don't have to play certain cards where you would if you're going to those bigger events. So build for your event. Try out different decks. Go watch videos. Test. Test this person's list. Try this one's list. Don't just take it and run with it. Oh, he won a region. I'm going to play his list. Play it, try it, see why they played certain cards, see what cards work, and then morph it a little bit for where you're going. Because even, say, a regional in California is going to be way different from a regional down in South America, which could be way different than a regional over in Europe. In these different locations, people play kind of differently, and it's interesting how it works, the different regions. But play, test, try different decks, watch videos, try their lists, understand their lists, and decide for you what's going to work best for you. Don't just grab someone else's list and go with it until, like, I don't know, at this point, certain, meta decks like Kashtira are pretty well figured out, and people will be like, okay, I'm just going to play that deck. He just won. The deck's figured out. But there's new decks coming into the format, so that means the deck's not figured out anymore. So now you should be trying different things once again. Side decking. What should you side deck? Fix your weak spots. Is your deck bad against back row, but back row's not that popular? You're probably going to want to side in some back row. Is your deck a going second deck and it's not good at going first? You're probably going to want to side some going first cards. Is it got a good matchup versus these 3 decks but bad versus these 2? You're going to want something to help you versus those 2. Don't overside. Don't side more than, personally, 6 is the number I try not to go over, because your main deck should already have generic cards that are good in the matchup, and if you side in 6 more, that's going to help you a lot. Once in a great while, like Mystic Mind format, I would side in like 9 back row at locals because I knew Mystic Mind would be there pretty heavy and I needed to be able to get over it. So there are going to be exceptions, but typically don't overside. I don't like siding 1 and 6 cards in a matchup, because it's like, well, if I side 9 cards, I have to see 1, but it seems like then you see 4 or 5, and it just does not work. Side decking, like deck building, is event specific. If you're going to a regional YCS, you should have a more broad side, more meta relevant side. If you're going to your locals, your side deck should be expecting the decks that you know are at your locals. Practice and know your side outs. So if you have certain cards in your deck that are just really easy to side out, know which cards those are. Like for me, with Kashtira, when I play 3 Theosis, a lot of time I'll side 1 out. I don't mind siding out that 3rd Theosis. Otherwise, hand traps in certain matchups, board breakers in certain matchups, going second cards when you're going first. Know which cards to side out during which situations. Don't just be like at the event and be like, oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm not sure what I should side out. Think about it before the event and even write it down. Make a little list if you need to and practice it and learn that list, because you can't bring that list with you when it's time to play the game. Know your deck. If you don't know your deck, you're not going to see success. If you know your deck, you can take a deck that isn't necessarily meta and sometimes do really well if the situation is right. Situational awareness being, if you're going first and you have all engine, what do? Like Kashtira. If you're going first, you open all engine. You don't want to just a Rise Heart pass because you have all engine. You have nothing to back it up. Ending on just that isn't going to win you the game. Now you could go like a Rise Heart Mind Hacker where you hit 8 cards from their deck and you have the Mind Hacker and you can banish the first card they get. Like if they try to book a moon a Rise Heart, you can even chain the Rise Heart, banish it face down, and then Mind Hacker's going to trigger in the new chain. Now they have 16 cards, which is half their deck, and maybe they can't even play at that point. Or you can go for the 5 lock combo, and obviously lock 5 zones is going to be very, very strong. You can go for double a Rise Heart. Make sure you know which to go with. If you open 2 engine cards, Forbidden Lance, a couple hand traps, you can go a Rise Heart pass, set the lance, have 2 hand traps to back it up. Know which situation you're in and be able to play with it. Can you OTK? Can you not OTK? Should you go for the OTK? If you know they have certain disruptions, should you go all for it and just risk losing, or do you play the safe route and out their board and then they get another turn and you prevent them from playing? Learning how to play through your disruptions, you should know what your key choke points are, how to play through them, what cards you need to get through certain situations. That kind of ties in with your play lines, knowing which play lines, which cards, which combos get you to what boards and through which disruptions, around which disruptions. Know your deck, and then you will be in a better situation. In addition to knowing your deck, know your meta, whether, once again, the regional, the locals, wherever you're going. Locals or regional YCS are just know the general meta. Your locals, know your local meta. That's the type of event. Locals, YCS, regional. Where you're going, what they're playing, know it. Expected decks, these are by knowing your meta. You should be able to expect, like mine, I expect a lot of Kashtira and a lot of Sprite, a couple Labyrinth, like 2 Despia, and then 3 to 5 Rogue players. That's what I expect when I go to locals. A bunch of those decks. What do those decks do? This ties back into watching videos, but watch videos on these other decks. Watch DB Grinder. Watch players playing these decks. See where to interact with them, where to disrupt them. Okay, I watched this happen 3 times and it did nothing. Well, maybe don't try negating that card, but I saw one person do this and did really good. Try it. Try that instead. You can even go the extra step and build that deck online if you don't want to spend the money and play it so you can learn their combos a little bit better, learn their play lines, learn their choke points, and learn where to interact with them. Respecting Rogue, a lot of time people will be playing a meta deck and have it set up and have great matchups across the meta, and they go to a regional, and the first 2 rounds they play Rogue decks and they lose to both of them because they weren't ready for it, because they didn't know what to do, they didn't know where to hit, they didn't know what to stop. They were not respecting the Rogue matchups. So respect your Rogue matchups. Learn as many decks as you can. If you know like 10 decent Rogue decks, just do a quick overview on them. Main generic cards that hit them: Ash Blossom, Infinite Impermanence, Drone Lockbird for the most part is too good this format even not to main it. Gamma Ogre isn't, I guess, as generic. Triple Tactic Talent is decently generic. Basic Removal's generic. Main deck more generic cards, so that way when you see that random Rogue deck round 1, you don't lose round 1 of the regional and now risk playing another Rogue deck, because then if you go 0-2, your climb back is going to be so much harder. I remember the last time I went to a Chicago regional, I played against Dark Magician round 1, and because of Secret Village, I lost. And then round 2, I ended up tying against another Rogue deck. So I started 0-1-1. I was able to finish the event out where I won 6 of my last 7 matchups. But at 6-2-1, I took 49th because my tiebreakers were so bad, because they happened right away, and then those players didn't do anything else. So I went 6-2-1 and got 49th and missed my invite that time. But yeah, I didn't respect Rogue. I wasn't prepared for it, and then once it came out, I was just like, okay, I have nothing I can do here. I'm going to lose this game. And you need to be able to respect the Rogue, especially because player skill. A very, very good player or an expert in a Rogue deck can absolutely take down an event. We saw Dinkabui win YCS Milan in, was it 2018, with Prank Kids right after they were released because nobody knew what they did, but he was an amazing player. They didn't do anything then for the next couple formats. They were not that good of a deck, but nobody knew what they did, and a very, very good player was piloting it, and he ended up taking down a YCS with a Rogue deck because of it. Just two more real quick. Read cards. Don't just take your opponent's opinion or advice for it. If you say, oh, what's that doing? They say, oh, it does this. Read the card, because they may leave something out. Just read the card. And no takebacks. At locals, okay, I understand. It's friends. It's people you see more regularly. It's a little more casual. Okay, let them redo it. At like a regional or higher, just, I'm sorry, but we're at a bigger event. I can't let you redo that. Like, that's just how it goes sometimes. When I say no takebacks, so say you have two monsters on board. One cannot be targeted, okay? They activate infinite impermanence, targeting the one that cannot be targeted. You can't make them say you have to target the other one. We do not force illegal actions into legal ones, so it would actually be like a PE minor, put the imperm back, go back to before they activated the illegal move. You do not force them to target the other card. That is not a take back, that is just a Konami rule. So do know the difference between that. And without any further ado, guys, it's time for me to go to work. So thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and until next time, take care.